It's never been more obvious to me that Canada needs to do something about the censorship that the federal government keeps putting onto us and keeps dumping on more and more in layers and layers. Things are happening around the globe that to some extent Canadians need to hear about so that they can make an educated assessment of what's happening and what they should do with the direction of their country and their lives piecemeal. Of course, the federal government seems to think that if you don't agree with the CBC, if you don't agree with the narrative that's coming directly from Mark Carney through the CBC and into the radio and television of this country, then the problem isn't that they have that need to have that kind of control. No. The problem is that you have decided to think for yourself. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. We have a lot to get into in this episode, so let's just jump right in. There's a lot of talk in this country about taxation. On the right and center, we say that there's too much taxation and that it's driving industry right out of the country. People don't want to believe that. People get whatever, they get into a certain feeling and they start to raise the taxes rather than raise development or raise the industry or the investment. The left says, no, it's not the situation. It's not what you think that it is. Well, the Fraser Institute just released a report detailing how all 10 of Canada's provinces have a higher tax rate, the higher money that you earn, so what they're calling a progressive tax rate, than more than half the OECD. Canadian provinces maintain some of the most progressive tax systems in the OECD. Tax progressivity refers to the degree to which the total tax burden increases as an individual or a family's income increases. Put differently, it is about how the tax burden is spread across income groups. So what they mean there is if you make no money, then you don't pay much taxes. But if you make a lot of money, you pay a lot more taxes. The thing is that when you're making a lot more money, just like Mark Carney does, you want to save your money. Just because you are already being taxed, even if you were taxed at the same rate, it would still be a considerable amount more money, but it's worse than that. So now if you make $100,000, instead of paying a tax rate of 20%, you're paying a tax rate of nearly 50% because you're being punished for being successful. The thing about being successful is that you have money and you understand how money works. And you know that if you simply leave the country, if you take your business elsewhere, you will keep more of that money in your pocket. I'll leave a link to the article. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I will say that on this list, it doesn't look very good for Canada. So here's the list. Canadian provinces have some of the most progressive tax systems in the industrialized world, more than selected countries. So we have the state of California, which anybody knows is as far left as it goes. And yet close behind them is Newfoundland and Labrador. They have the highest unemployment rate in the country, Newfoundland and Labrador. And the way that they feel they're going to stimulate industry is by charging the people that in Newfoundland and Labrador have money, more money. Now, this is the flaw with socialism, don't you see? This is the flaw. If you don't have to earn your money and you just sit around and tax people who do earn their money, the people who earn the money and see it go out the door leave the province. They take their industry, they go elsewhere, they sell it, and they do nothing but hide their money, just like you see Brookfield doing. Newfoundland is close behind California. Imagine. Then we go through, a couple of spots. Nova Scotia comes in 6th, New Brunswick 7th, PEI 8, Quebec 10, Ontario 11, British Columbia 12, Manitoba 15, Alberta 16, Saskatchewan 17. And then it's countries after that. Countries. Our provinces charge more progressive tax rates than whole entire countries on this earth. So on top of having the federal taxes and the federal restrictions, anybody that wants to invest in our country has to put up with some of the highest tax rates in the OECD, which is to say some of the highest tax rates in the developed world. We can't sustain that. We can't have it that way. And anyone who out there is trying to tell you that if you don't charge more tax rates, I'm going to glue myself to the road, needs to realize and needs to grow up and needs to be taught what it means to be an adult. Because it's childish, foolish thinking like that has driven billions of dollars out of our country, has increased the unemployment rate to the point where it's only a little bit of a whisper away from a complete collapse. The proof is in the pudding. And this is what from the Fraser Institute showcasing how of the top 17 regions in the developed economies, 10 of them are taken up not only by our country, but by the provinces, the individual regions in our country. Because a person makes a lot of money doesn't mean that they should be paying more. That's not really the way the tax system is going to benefit everybody. Because the people that are the poorest just need jobs. And the people that are the wealthiest can generate jobs. And anybody in the middle who's trying to convince you that they should pay more because they have more simply doesn't have anything. And that's why they tell you that kind of stuff. Or they tell you that and do like Mark Carney and take billions of their dollars and put them in tax shelters in other countries that don't have progressive tax rates. Either way, there's a flaw here, and we are never going to be able to attract investment when that investment realizes that we have the highest taxation collectively in the developed world. They'll tell you, hey, Sterling, don't you think that there's a problem? We're not developing any of our natural resources, and the whole wide world doesn't want any natural gas. Excellent. U.S. natural gas futures climbed 4% on near record LNG flows and the cold December forecast. So the people that own the oil or own the natural gas are seeing it increase by 4% in value because they have so much of it and because it's going to be cold this year because of global warming, I guess. Well, Quebec has had enough of immigration. It turns out that they're not going to renew a program that they had put in place or that a previous government had put in place. I'm not sure. I only know that they are closing that door for anybody who wants to try to seek to be a permanent resident inside of Quebec. And I hear nothing coming out of the CBC, nothing coming out of the mainstream media in shock of this. Imagine if Pierre Poilievre had done this. That's all we'd hear. It'd just be all over everywhere. It'd just be like pasted on the sides of buildings and everything else. But because the progressive left is doing this, the progressive leftist says nothing. I guess it's no big deal. We'll simply, instead of allowing them to go into Quebec, we'll just shove more of them into Ontario. Legault says no exceptions as immigrants protest end of permanent residence pathway. Imagine. They're protesting. Premier François Legault said his government will not make any exceptions for permanent residence applications submitted through the province's soon-to-be defunct Quebec Experience program. The Quebec government announced last week that the PEQ, an important pathway to permanent residency, will end on November the 19th, making the Skilled Worker Select program the only route for those wishing to settle in the province for economic reasons. And they don't care. They're not stopping. They're not going to do anything. Nobody, you can be darn tooting that Carney's not going to say anything about it, that the Liberal government in the House of Commons is not going to say anything about it. And that's the point we're trying to showcase here, that all of a sudden it's very quiet. It's crickets when the far left decides that they don't want any more immigration. Now, if Danielle Smith was to say it, or if Pierre Poilievre was to say it, oh my goodness, the things that would be coming out of the press, the hate that would be being put forward by the corporations in this country that are targeting certain political groups and leaving other political groups alone, discriminating against some political groups and not other political groups. Now, I'm not sure, but that does not sound very progressive. That does not sound very constitutional from where I am sitting. And it's being conducted from the most wealthiest people in our country. Not to worry, though, all of those temporary foreign workers can go down into the United States, where Saudi Arabia has signed a $30 billion worth of energy deals with the United States. $30 billion, that's how much money Saudi Arabia is currently putting in upgrades and investment in oil and gas, natural gas, all of the energy deals that they like to talk about. And if these guys are investing in oil, you know that there's probably no end in sight to the demand for such products. Well, Mark Carney's getting desperate. Now, I was going to report on this, or excuse me, I saw the story earlier, but I didn't report on it. I was waiting to see what kind of story would come out of it. Nothing came out of it, which is just another example of the mainstream media not talking to the Canadian people about the things that they need to know. For example, the Canadian military will rely on an army of public servants to boost its ranks by 300,000. I'm pretty sure that makes us a military dictatorship. When you go into any government office and they are all reservists, doesn't that mean that they are all active service duty members? Doesn't that mean that we're dealing only with the military? Isn't that kind of how they do it in countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan and all that? The Canadian Forces is counting on public servants to volunteer for military service as it tries to ramp up an army of 300,000 as part of the mobilization plan, according to a Defense Department directive. Federal and provincial employees would be given 1 week training course in how to handle firearms, drive trucks, and fly drones. Isn't that funny? All you have to do to be considered safe with a gun in this country is not get all of the testing that the RCMP gives you. No, don't do that. Just go get a job with the government. And they're going to take you out into the firing range once a week and teach you how to fly drones and fire firearms. That seems a bit of a contradiction from a government that is desperate to take the firearms away from the people in the street. I mean, it just seems to me that if you want to make sure that you have a national defense grid, it would begin with the people in the street. But that probably doesn't occur to the Carney government because they feel that they can control the people that work for them, and they can't control the people who might, defend the neighborhood in, say, downtown Vancouver. The public servants would be included in the supplementary reserve, which is currently made up of inactive and retired members of the Canadian Forces who are willing to return to duty if called. At this point, there are 4,384 personnel in the supplementary reserves, but in the case of emergency, that would be boosted to 300,000 because what you think about when you talk about I would take those 4,300 over 50,000 of these 300,000 reserves. I'll tell you right now. At least the 4,300 know what they're doing. 300, think of every time you've gone into a government office, do you think in your mind when you're looking at that person, this is a lethal killing machine and that if anything ever happened, I would be able to stand behind them? Or do you think in your mind, it's not a bad job. I wonder how they got it so I could try to get it too. I mean, do you see what I'm saying there is that do you see much difference between you sitting there and them sitting, like kind of level playing field, right? And how is 1 week training going to change that? And why would the government not offer 1 week training to everybody in the country? And that way there we have a reserve force of 40 million. Of course, the government doesn't really seem to think their way through these problems. They just want to react and overreact. And somehow they feel that they can hire people into the government who might be temporarily in this country. And they are then going to train them, these temporary people, to fly drones and in defense of the nation and firearms in defense of the citizens of this country. Oh, yeah, this plan doesn't sound like a fiasco at all. This is the Liberal government for you, folks. This is what they got. This is the best they can come up with. We can't get anybody to join our very, very woke military, so we're just going to draft everybody that works in the federal and provincial governments. Don't worry, if you are out there and you work for the federal government or the provincial government and you're worried that you don't want to become a soldier, frontline soldier, you can always try to get a job down in West Virginia, because Blackstone, which is a company much like BlackRock or Brookfield, that they just invest in stuff that's going to make them money, is Blackstone Energy Transition Partners announces a $1.2 billion investment to build the first ever natural gas power generating facility in Western Virginia. So they're going to bring natural gas from the basin in Texas in all likelihood, drop it off in West Virginia, and that's going to boil some water and spin some generators and give electricity to Western Virginia, at least parts of it, or perhaps an AI system. Who knows? What I know is that this is yet another example of how the Liberal government has told us one thing, and all of the rich, wealthy people seem to be doing the exact opposite, like investing in natural gas that is actually going to fire an electricity generating station. So, I mean, it just seems so contradictory to what we're being told by people like Guilbeault and DeBruzen and Carney. No? Now, here's a great example of the far left thinking that they can just censor anybody whenever they want to. The British Columbia Attorney General is deeply disturbed by social media giant's intimate image case. Well, there's a lot of things about the British Columbia government that makes me disturbed. So maybe we can find some common ground here. British Columbia's Attorney General says she's deeply disturbed that the social media company X has. Oh, I see. So now all of a sudden it's about Elon Musk. A legal challenge against an order to remove a non-consensual intimate image from the internet. Nikki Sharma says the social media firm is challenging a clear order from British Columbia's Civil Resolution Tribunal to remove an image from its platform for violating the province's Intimate Image Protection Act. I'll say that again. The BC Civil Resolution Tribunal feels that they have the authority to tell X what they can do with their platform. The arrogance. The arrogance. The company says the petition filed by British Columbia Supreme Court this month is that it promptly complied with the tribunal's order by blocking access to the offending image in Canada, but not elsewhere, in practice known as geo-blocking. Well, that makes sense. Canada doesn't want it showing. I mean, Canada blocks things all the time. The British Columbia government blocks, they get Google to block things all the time. So X says, okay, you don't want this image to be shown in Canada. We're going to go ahead and respect that. This image of a person who is, I guess, nude. I don't know. I don't see that X would be participating in something that is an illegal image. So the image must contain an adult. The tribunal issued a penalty of $100,000 against the company in September for failing to delete the image globally, saying it was insufficient to block the content in Canada, but allow it to be seen in other jurisdictions. But you don't have authority in other jurisdictions, lady. That's the thing you need to hear. You don't have the authority to tell X what they're doing in the United States, what they're doing in Mexico, what they're doing in all. I mean, they're in many, many countries around the world. Brazil, they're in Asia, they're in South Asia, they're all over the world. You feel that you have the authority to tell them what to do, what you're going to be doing all over the world. That's not arrogant at all, is it? That's not overstepping your authority as a provincial attorney general in a country that is not even where the headquarters of this particular media company lie. But you feel that you can just stomp it out because you said so, and if they don't do it, we're going to charge them $100,000. You know what? You waited a long time for that $100,000. I think that you should sit by your mailbox and just wait for that checks to come on in. At least then we could probably get something done. I mean, I get that the person posted an image of somebody and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But they're not showing it to anybody that lives in Canada. I can't see it. I live in Canada. But you don't have the right to tell them what they can do with in the United States or any of the other countries around the world. And the idea that you think that you have that right is exactly the problem with the far left. Now, I'll leave a link to the article. I just wanted to, I'm just going to finish with this quote from the Attorney General. And I think that that kind of sums up exactly what we should be looking at in this country. Under British Columbia law, these images must be removed when ordered to do so, without exception. Sharma says, blocking access only within our borders is not enough. Survivors deserve real protection, not half measures. Do you mean people who survived lifetimes of censorship? Do you mean people who have survived oppressive governments? Do you mean people who have survived malicious governments? Yes, I agree with you that you shouldn't be overstepping your bounds for all of the people that live in Canada who are running away from hateful, oppressive governments who think that they have the authority to tell the world how to behave and what they should view. I completely agree with you. See, I told you if we read far enough this article, we could find something to agree with me and this provincial government employee who works for the public, Miss Sharma, who seems to think that that gives her the authority to order X to take this image down off of their platform anytime they want. Now, what I find amazing about that is that if Miss Sharma went on there and said something that people didn't agree with, she would be saying, no, it's free speech. Freedom of speech. I have the right to say whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. You can't tell them this is a private server, all the rest of those kinds of things that we hear about every time we try and talk about all the hate that gets spread towards, say, men and young boys on TikTok. But we don't hear Ms. Sharma worrying about that too much, do we? Either way, I'm not trying to take away from however embarrassed that individual who had the picture taken of them may feel. But I will say that Ms. Sharma thinking that British Columbia law has the right to tell Elon Musk what he can do in Mexico is a very, very telling concept of how the inside of her mind runs and how At what point do we tell ourselves that we can simply go down into Mexico and start arresting people and putting them in prison because they violated something that may have happened in British Columbia? I mean, where does it end, Ms. Sharma? Where does it end? And why are you being so selective about this one image while TikTok rampantly and repeatedly violates all kinds of civil liberties in this country, and you do nothing, you say nothing? Overstepping your bounds seems to be the flavor of the far left. Thinking that you have the right to tell everybody what to do because you got elected into office and then picked to be the attorney general by your very far left premier is a level of arrogance that you probably should take up with somebody. You should probably consider how far outside of your actual mandate you are tiptoeing. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.